Hello, Ontario ski coaches. My name is Paul Hemsworth, and I am the strength and conditioning coach for the NTDC Thunder Bay ski team. And I've been asked to do a series of videos here, of short videos, to sort of explain a little bit of sort of philosophy behind, I guess, our approach with the team, but also with strength training in general for endurance athletes, specifically for the skiers that we're working with. And so what I'm going to do is provide sort of about 5 or 6 short videos on different progressions for different lifts, some of the major ones that I want to kind of cover with people, because I know everybody's sort of starting from various backgrounds as coaches and the knowledge in strength and conditioning, but also with their athletes starting from different levels of anything from human movement to performance to strength training history as well. So we've got sort of these, far-reaching variations in the athletes themselves, and we sort of have these variations in the amount of knowledge that we have as coaches from a strength training perspective. And I also realize for sure that you guys aren't always going to have the resources to have a full-time strength and conditioning coaches for your athlete. And that's totally fine. That's the reality of sport in Canada, is that we just can't do that with especially from the grassroots level and some of the club teams and stuff like that. So what I want to do is sort of dispel a few myths, give you some fundamental basic understanding of progressions for different lifts, and then also some of the whys behind the lifts that we're doing and when to bring those in. And I think to start off, I want to just talk a little bit, before I go into the practical stuff, of why we're doing this. Why do we strength train endurance athletes? And 20, 30, 40 years ago, this didn't really exist, or it existed very much on a individual level, with many different thought patterns as to how to approach strength training, if you did it at all. Some countries still don't see a big value in it, and I can see why in terms of performance. But I also think that it's come a long way since then. We've got a lot more science behind what we're trying to apply as coaches. And I also, when we look at cross-country skiers, the sport has changed so much more, even since I've become involved with the NTDC team, which has, been in the last, 5-6 years or so. With the amount of upper body strength needed, even before, so knowing that it was about 70% upper body, for the most part, it's probably changed even more so now with so much of the double polling happening. So we do need to change our approaches, but overall, the goal of the endurance athlete is to, if we don't need to build size right now, some of them do need to build size, but if we don't need to build size, if they're at a weight that we're happy with, then we want to have a high strength to weight ratio or power to rate ratio. And how do we go about that? Why do we do that? If you look at the literature, the reason why we want to strength train an endurance athlete is basically movement economy. It's increased rate of force development and increase movement economy. It's not, it's certainly not to bulk them up if that's not the goal. It's definitely not to slow them down. It's actually to get them moving with less effort, with less effort going towards stabilizing and getting them lined up properly so the biomechanics are off and that sort of thing. And so the other thing that I find interesting is that the approach to strength training for endurance athletes has very much been misunderstood and not evidence-based. When you actually look at the research, we want to train heavy eventually. Okay, so this is, I'm talking to a broad range of coaches here, and with a varying range of age for athletes. But eventually, once there's some background in lifting, we want to be able to actually train significant loads and be as explosive as we can with those lifts, which is very contrary to the common belief that we should actually have lower load situations for higher reps, sort of mimicking the endurance component of the cross-country ski sport itself. So when we see it, what we're looking for is actually to be able to have higher rest periods in our prescriptions, focusing on some major lifts, full body lifts, unilateral lifts, looking as explosively as we can once the person has been able to control their movements. And then from there we can play around with some of the other variables. But by and far what I'm seeing right now is a very big lack of, from a young age, movement capabilities of the individual. So 20, 30 years ago, a person that was 12 years old moved a lot better than a 12-year-old does now. And that's just a product of our society, I think, with a lot more sitting around, even if they're not just sitting in a desk, but just, you know, in one position. A lot more specialization, so a lot less athleticism. So what we're trying to do is bring back movement. So looking at the prerequisites of what they have to go through. So do they have the prerequisites for the various positions are going to be from a ski specific standpoint, and do they have the prerequisites to be able to lift what they're trying to do? So for example, if I'm trying to get somebody to squat, we have a whole series of things we need the body to do in order to squat. So what you'll see, a big thing for me is looking at those prerequisites, trying to create them, trying to make sure that we have resilient joints that can move through a big range of motion, but also to be able to control that motion and have strength through that motion. So a lot of the early work with the younger athletes, so the younger kids, is really about trying to get that back and trying to get as good of a shot as getting, you know, them ready for what it is that they're trying to do. That's also done for another reason, which is to actually have durability of a tissue. So injuries are going to occur when the tissue tolerance is less than the load that's being applied. Okay, it sounds pretty basic, but how many kids are actually training in positions that they're being compromised in, or where injuries actually occur, which is a lot when the muscles are in a longer state under force. So really looking at that eccentric component of their training. But if they don't have the prerequisite range of motion, then when you're loading them up, all you're doing is you're forcing them into a position. Forcing them to a position that they have no business being in. And I can't think of a faster way of bringing them to the physiotherapist's office than loading them up in a position that they can't actively get in them on their own. So if a person can't squat in their body weight and have, you know, great ankle range of motion, knee, hip, and spine is moving well in a neutral spine position, then we're not loading them up yet. Okay, so that's the big thing that I want everybody to take from this, is that we have to know where the athlete is at in order to progress them. So we shouldn't just be saying, you know what, we need our athletes stronger, so we need them lifting at 12, 13, 14 years old. We need to have them deadlifting, squatting, you know, overhead pressing, all these things. Yeah, that's great to say, and that's, you know, it sounds cool, but it's not actually addressing the root issue, which is to be able to move well in order to lift well, in order to perform well. So if we don't have that, then we're wasting our time. We're trying to backpedal when they're, you know, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, when they should be in a nice position in a lot of their lifts, and we're having to backpedal and try and get them that range of motion that they should have been getting at quite a younger age. So I hope that that's what you can take out of this. I'm always available to, if you want to reach out, and you guys can email me, paul@thrivestrengthandwellness.com, for questions that you might have from these videos. But I hope you enjoy, and good luck the rest of the way.